When I was 8 years old, and my brother Jack was almost 17, my mother told me the most amazing news. She told me that my father had been married before, and Jack had a different mother. This was the most fascinating thing I'd ever heard. She also told me that she had always wanted a really big family, but she couldn't get pregnant until she had an operation. So she did have an operation, and she had me. After I was born, the doctor said to her, "Now don't have any more children, because at your advanced age it would be very dangerous for you." She was 34 years old. So she didn't have any more children, and I always knew that I would be the only one that she ever had. But my mother had an alternate life occupying her imagination. In her imaginary life, she had another family. Their name was the Chumleys. This is an English word that looks as though it should be pronounced Montpelier, but it's not. The Chumleys lived in upstate New York, as did I. They lived in a white house on top of a hill with a long, winding driveway lined with poplar trees, with sheep grazing on the hillside. Every Wednesday, one of the children was allowed. There were 8 little Chumleys. They all had sandy-colored curly hair and lots of freckles. There were 2 sets of twins. One set was named Jack and Joanna. Every Wednesday, one of the children was allowed to have a guest for dinner. Every Sunday, one of the children sat with my mother and planned the menus for the week, ensuring that his or her favorite foods would be included. Every night, the older children read aloud to an assigned younger child. They had an English sheepdog, and there was a chart for feeding and brushing him. My mother was a musician. They all played instruments. Every Saturday night they had a musicale with her on the piano and the children sawing away on their cellos and violins. And there was a clarinet and a flute in there also. My mother was a knitter, so every year she knitted 1 or 2 sweaters and gave them to the older children, who were then to pass them along to the younger children. Every Sunday, they went to church and sat all in a line. And one Sunday, my mother was very pleased to note that all the children were wearing sweaters that she had knitted. She loved to watch them go down the long driveway to the waiting yellow school bus with their brightly colored knitted hats bobbing along. Once my mother took a bus from Syracuse to Buffalo to see her own mother. She told her seatmate on the bus about her family, the Chumleys, as if it were real life, a real family. The woman oohed and awed over how young she looked to have 8 children, and they sounded like a very lovely family. My mother lowered her eyes and smiled modestly. She said, "We have a very good time." The doings of the Chumleys, their names, their talents, their games, these were the stories of my childhood. So I grew up and got married, and we had a baby sooner than we expected to. 2 years later, we had another one. Then I worked for Head Start for a few years, and then 5 years later, we had another one. When that one was a year old, my husband got a postdoctoral fellowship to Yale, so we moved the whole family to Connecticut. When we got there, I got pregnant again. Yale at that time was ground zero and a hotbed of ZPG. Who knows what that is? Say.
Zero population growth.
Zero population growth. If I went anywhere with all 3 children and a big belly, I was likely to be told that I was piggy for having so many children.
Piggy.
Of course, they were right. I knew there were too many people in the world. But oh man, having those babies, It was quite literally irresistible. I went to an obstetrician for prenatal care in Connecticut, and he said, you're 32, and you've got 4 children. You're a good candidate for a tubal ligation. Excuse me, I said, I don't want a tubal ligation, and I would appreciate if you didn't mention it again. Okay, he said. When I was 8 months pregnant, we went back to Eastern Pennsylvania. My parents had an Airstream trailer, and there was an Airstream rally in Hershey. So we put all the children in the car, and we went to visit them. My husband and my father were outside on the concrete slab that they call a patio. My mother and I were in the trailer making potato salad, and I said to her, do you know what that doctor in Connecticut said to me? He suggested that I have a tubal ligation. Can you believe that? Oh, Joby, she said very gently, what a good idea. You and Danny can't really afford any more children, can you? Kaboom. I suddenly realized I was having babies for my mother. I didn't exactly aspire to have 8, but I wanted to have the big family that she was unable to have. We just never know what scripts we're following, do we? When we got back to Easton, I called my obstetrician and asked him to schedule a tubal ligation for after the birth. So my mother's been gone more than 30 years now. My children, blessedly, all live in New England with children of their own, and I adore them all. But the Chumleys, freckled and making music, live on forever in my heart.